Good evening, I'm Dean Beck, and it's my absolute pleasure to be with you for this first episode of a new series here on Ben TV. Now, it's rare to have the luxury of devoting an entire program to just one guest, but in each episode that is exactly what we will do. In profile tonight is a man who way back in January 2004 got married to his partner in Canada. Now, upon their return, they became the first couple to challenge the federal courts to have their overseas nuptials recognised here in Australia. He's humble, determined, disarmingly charming, and oozing with integrity. And his battle for equality remains to this day. So much so that he is the founder and leader of one of Australia's newest political parties. Now, he's planning to run for a Senate seat in the forthcoming federal election. In profile tonight is the leader of the Australian Equality Party, Jason Tuazon-McCheyne. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dean. It's good to be here.
Jason, take us back to 2004 when you and your partner Adrian went to Canada and got married over there. Why did you do that, and why did you then make that stand in the federal courts?
Well, 4 years earlier, we had a non-legal wedding at Heide Museum of Modern Art with 80 guests. We just made it all up. We wanted to be married. And then when suddenly Canada had legislated for marriage equality, we thought, wow, somewhere in the world we can go to and get married. So we actually did two things on that trip. We went and were married at Toronto City Hall. And we also then stopped in LA and started the process to have our son Ruben, who obviously wasn't at that point our son Ruben, but
he was just a figment of your imagination.
And
right.
2 years later he was born. So then we came home, and someone Adrian was working with at Melbourne University knew someone another female couple who are dear friends to this very day, and she's now the deputy leader of the party. We asked the family court to validate our Canadian marriages.
And how did that go?
Not very well,
right.
because it was an election year, and Mr. Howard and his government actually legislated the changes a week and a half before the first court date.
Is that
was right
time-wise? Yeah, that's where it all happened.
And wrote it in such a way that our court case was there was no case to have.
Yeah.
And now, what are we, 11 years later, and we're still waiting. So I feel partly responsible for that, though it probably would have happened anyway. It was a big day.
Why is it important to you?
To be married?
Yeah.
Look, I know it's not important for everybody.
Sure.
That's okay. But for Adrian and I have been together 17 years, and our son is 9.5 now. We think we should be treated equally like everybody else. And at the end of the day, it's about owning language and space and being embraced as an equal.
Why do you need a society externally to justify your love?
Oh, they don't.
Right.
I mean, I'm happily married in my own mind. But the reality is we live in a country where you're allowed to still demonise LGBTI people if you have a particular religious belief, and it's okay. Or if you have a political belief, it's okay. If marriage equality is, once it happens, and there are other things that also need to happen, I think that cannot happen anymore. You can't demonise women publicly anymore. You can't demonise Indigenous people publicly anymore, even though there's racism, obviously, and sexism. We need to get to a point where we can't be demonised anymore.
There seems to be partly an evolutionary change going on. The younger people just don't care, and at one point in time there's going to be that tipping point where there's more of them than there is of those who are hanging on to these older values. Why do we need to fast-track that?
So, as a marriage celebrant, so I do 70 weddings a year.
Ironically.
Marriage has evolved, and people are very much getting married as much as they ever used to. And it's not the same anymore. It's not about the woman being owned by the man as a piece of property. It's not about expectation to get married, because most people are in their 30s now. It's not even about, the rules have changed. It's about sharing your relationship publicly with your friends and family and celebrating that. But they also get some legal benefits as well. Now, I know that we have de facto laws in Australia, which is good, but the reality is we're still second-class citizens, and there's no reason anymore why we shouldn't have the right to be able to be married. And if we don't want to be married, that's fine too. There are de facto laws that take care of us. There's no right or wrong way to create your own family.
Those laws, we hear tragic cases of people on their deathbed and the partner not being able to provide the wishes of the dying individual, or left out of the hospital ward. Are we still doing that in this country?
Yeah, it's still happening, because if you're not married, you've still got to prove your relationship. And so it depends on who you get.
And next of kin have right of way.
Absolutely. I remember Adrian and I, when our son was conceived, we had to go and spend a lot of time on our wills, because suddenly we had a child and we had to make sure, and I remember once Adrian being sick in the hospital, it was 10 years ago now, and they said to me, kept saying to me, "So who are you? You're his brother?" I'm like, "No, this is my husband." And they kept saying, "You're a brother?" And my husband is Filipino Australian. We don't look like brothers.
No, you don't. No.
And as they were injecting him with something to stop him from vomiting, I'm like, I'm not his brother. And it just, look, there are things that need to change, and we hyphenated our last names just to make sure there were less issues around, who's Ruben's parent and who we are. Because we've been separated in immigration lines travelling overseas before because we had different names.
You have this beautiful son, Ruben, who's how old now?
9.5.
Tell us briefly how that process was for you, because it's not easy to have a child by surrogacy overseas.
No, it wasn't. And we were the 4th or 5th people in the country to do that. And I remember going to a Rainbow Families conference at the Arts Centre back in 2000, and Anthony Wood was there talking about how they were in the process of having their now son Zan, who's like 11 or 12. And we were like, wow, can we actually have our own family? And that planted the seed, and we always thought if we had a son, we'd call him Ruben, which is after Adrian's father. And then on that trip to get married, we met with Growing Generations in California, and I remember walking out into the lovely LA sun. It was like 25 and sunny, and Adrian said to me, "This is impossible, we can't do this." And I said, "Well, nothing's impossible." And 2 years and 1 month later, Ruben was born. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was, I'm a bit crazy, but the two pieces of paper that I love the most are our marriage certificate from Canada and our birth certificate for our son, and both of us are on the birth certificate. And to me, that's pretty special, because I grew up my entire life, I didn't come out till I was 28, thinking that there was no family for me, both as in regards to having a partner or children, and I'd have to forever be hiding who I was. And that, in a very quick space of time, changed.
We are with Jason Tuazon-McCheyne. He is my guest in Profile tonight. He's the leader of the Australian Equality Party. Please stay with us. We'll be right back after this.